You're listening to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, a travel podcast with hosts Stephen Seagraves, Fosma Moon, and Seth Miller. Hello, and welcome to Dots, Lines, and Destinations, episode 315. I'm Stephen Seagraves, joined by Seth Miller and Fosma Moon. Gentlemen.
Can you name the 315 area code?
No.
Upstate New York?
Upstate New York, Syracuse. It's
Nice.
like 15 minutes north of Ithaca, where I went to college. So it was, my girlfriend for a while lived in 315 and I was in 607. It was very confusing.
Back when that was a big deal.
Yeah, when that mattered. Anyway.
I remember, Houston used to only have one area code for the longest time.
713, right?
713, yeah. And when they introduced the new area code, which was 281, people were losing their minds.
10-digit dialing, mandatory. It was an overlay, wasn't it?
Yeah. And they were not excited.
It was an interesting... I mean, I can't believe we spent so much time talking about area codes on this show now. We made Dots, Lines, Destinations, and area codes. We have to rename ourselves. But early on, it was all splits, not overlays.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there was a technical reason for it or not, but it was definitely a situation where, like, you could keep your phone number, but you got a different area code, or you got, or you just, whatever, like the way they split them up. And then all of a sudden someone realized, like, we could just do overlays and not change everybody's number. But if we do that, everything becomes 10-digit dialing instead of 7 versus 10.
Yep.
And I think there was, at some point, they must have just realized, like, you know what, it's all 10-digit for most people anyways at this point. Let's just be done with it.
Yep.
It varied state by state. So when they started rolling it out, a lot of people, initially they always split. Yeah. Then when they started considering overlaying, certain states were more amenable to it and forced it, while others refused, until eventually it got forced through everywhere.
Yeah. And then there's a couple states that are still a single area code, like mine.
Now, how do you know if an area code is older versus the newer?
0 or 1 in the middle digit.
Exactly. And you know why.
Really?
Yeah, so the original, and we talked about this a little bit last week, the original area codes were, it was all rotary phone, but you had the 1 or the 0 for the dialing, and I guess it's because, Foz, does this go back to our Klondike 5 conversation? They didn't have letters on them?
I don't think we had a Klondike 5 conversation.
That was me and you. That was
me and Steven? Yeah, sorry. I barely remember how an episode went 30 seconds after I said it. But.
The 0 and the 1 is because the old telephone equipment wouldn't recognize anything other than the 0 or 1 in the middle.
Wow.
Yeah, but those also were the digits that didn't have numbers on them, or didn't have letters on them, I'm sorry. So, interesting. Anyway.
Yeah. We got some follow-up.
Yeah. So, speaking of things I don't remember 30 seconds after I said them, got a couple things wrong last week. Thank you to a couple listeners for pointing them out. Liechtenstein uses the Swiss franc, not the euro, and so when we were talking about collecting euro coins and getting them from each country, I believe it was San Marino, where I collected the coin, and that's entirely possible. I'm wrong about that too, but who the hell knows? It happened, I swear. And we talked about the rollover with not Alaska American, doing rollover, and suggested that they might be the first to roll over the earnings into next year. And it turns out Delta had announced that way back in April, long enough ago that we'd already forgotten about it. So you have 2 airlines now that for the rest of the year, anything you earn miles-wise will count towards status in 2021 earning for 2022 status year.
Oh, interesting. So do you think United will eventually follow behind this?
No.
No? Why not?
I think it's too late to announce it at this point for it to make sense. Like, could they retroactively be like, and hey, everybody, we're going to give you credit for everything? Perhaps. But I don't think they'll go out of their way to announce it as a promotion to try to attract traffic. Also, I think there's an interesting dichotomy in terms of how airlines are trying to use their loyalty programs to attract traffic versus just make money. And I'm not sure United's doing it particularly well with either. I don't know any of them are doing it really well with either, but anyway.
Well,
what were you going to say, Foz?
I was going to say, they allegedly reduced the thresholds for the year. Well, when I look in the app, because I've hit my 1K requirement from a lifetime perspective, it still wants me to make $21,000 in purchases.
You can still do that. You get plenty of time.
Yeah, I'm not doing that. But it hasn't. The point being that they haven't actually dropped it for everyone.
Yeah, interesting.
New topics. I think the big news that everyone saw this week was Singapore's Newark-Singapore flight is actually being moved over to JFK.
Non-stop
JFK Singapore. No need to go through Frankfurt. And this happens November? Is that
November 7th, I think, is the first flight.
Yeah.
But allegedly, the Frankfurt flight's going to come back.
Well, I think it has. I think it's filling in the extra days.
You can tell they used the flight number for the Newark nonstop. They used 2324, not 2526.
But if you go look in spring, you'll start seeing both the nonstop and the one stop.
Yeah.
I wonder how much the nonstop went to Newark because they couldn't get slots at JFK versus they wanted the diversity. I have to assume it's the former, not the latter.
I think a lot of it was driven to Newark because of pharma.
Interesting, because they definitely said that's the other thing about this, bringing the nonstop back, is they said it's going to be driven a lot by cargo initially because passengers can sort of transit but can't really stop in Singapore for the most part without quarantine, at least right now, and some other things. But they specifically called out the cargo needs as a reason to move it to JFK, and pharma was one of the specific cargoes listed. So,
but pharma manufacturing is different than pharma business travelers.
So you think the difference is moving the goods versus the people?
Yeah.
Because the pharma companies were headquartered in Jersey, so that was people, but now manufacturing is out on Long Island.
I think it might actually be connecting traffic, because I can't imagine that JFK makes more sense to truck cargo in than Newark from anywhere but Long Island or the city. Connection.
And it's not like Manhattan has huge manufacturing resources,
right. So it has to be. It might be related to a lot of the traffic coming from Puerto Rico, because there's a lot of pharma marketing, manufacturing in Puerto Rico now.
Yeah, absolutely. But a lot of that's carried in by United on the the climate-controlled wide bodies.
Right. You've got one flight from Newark, whereas how many flights do you have in and out of JFK?
Yeah, but climate-controlled.
But I think there's more cargo operations in JFK too.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know. The nonstop's coming back.
Well, and so here's my question. Like, they're using the the non-ULR version of the A350.
Yes.
Which is an interesting change because it means there's true economy now on the flight rather than just a premium economy and business.
And looking at the numbers, there's more, if I remember correctly, it's very close or even more economy class seats on the regular 350 layout than total seats on the ULR layout of just business and premium economy.
Really? Well,
I think it's like 153 to 160 or something like that.
I mean, let's say they sold it to capacity. Could they even do the flight? I don't think they could, right? I don't think they can make it.
With no cargo,
yeah,
maybe.
But
let's be honest, nothing's selling to capacity right now.
Unless you're on a United flight.
Even those.
I've seen photos. People are like, my flight's full.
Occasional individual flights on average, though. I mean, United, I think, had a 43% load factor last month or something stupid like that.
The transcons are definitely full.
Killing it. They're killing it.
Well, I mean, when you go from 12 to 4.
The other big news is Cathay Pacific is killing off their Cathay Dragon brand. And this is sad, I guess. I mean, Cathay Dragon's kind of their low-cost, no-frills carrier, right?
Well, Hong Kong Express is technically a low-cost carrier. The Cathay Dragon was Dragon Airways or some Dragon Express, something like that. It was a different airline that they bought out to reduce competition. And they sort of forced all of the... Not forced. They moved a lot of the mainland China traffic that way. And I still don't know if there's a necessary split between mainland China traffic and not across operators and how the sort of the route authorities go. I know a lot of the route authorities are assigned to Cathay Dragon, and they're going to have to try to bring them back to either Hong Kong Express or Cathay Pacific parent, right? But it's not like the old days where you had KLM Asia with different planes dedicated to go to mainland China versus Taiwan and Hong Kong. So, I don't know. And United load factor was just under 50% for the quarter.
And the thing with the Cathay Dragon is they also had 320s and 321s, right? Yeah,
single aisle aircraft. So they're keeping the 10 training pilots on, but all the other pilots are being furloughed and are terminated. And those pilots are going to train the legacy Cathay Pacific staff, however many of them are going to switch over to flying single aisle planes. So it sounds like some of those aircraft are going to shift to the Cathay Pacific family, which, if you look at the order book, they've got 321 Neos. There's 2 or 3 painted, basically ready for delivery. They were ready for delivery at the beginning of the year. They have the new business class flatbeds and everything. And then, shit went bad, and so they delayed and deferred and whatever. But they're ready for delivery now, and they're waiting to figure that out. But they got the red tail, not the green tail, so this one's going to have to repaint that at some point.
And so, I mean, Cathay doesn't operate any single aisles. Sorry, Foz. Yeah, it'll be a big change. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the question is, will they bring back people that have been furloughed to do the single aisle on the Cathay side, or are they going to demote people?
I would assume, I believe it. I mean, demote is a relative term, but there'll be new bids opening. Is my understanding for people to convert. I think that they don't expect to fly the full wide body fleet for some time. Like they're gonna operate a quarter of capacity for the next 6 months or so. They think Q4, Q1 will be a quarter of capacity of 2019 levels, and maybe if they're lucky, 50% by the end of 2021. So let's assume that they're going to have plenty of people hanging out with nothing to do.
I mean, in your opinion, I mean, this just makes me question everything about the future of airlines, right? Because they're failing. Their low-cost carrier is gone now, or one of their low-cost or single-out carriers, whatever you want to call it. How does the rest of the industry survive if the predictions are right that 2022 is when we'll see an actual return to normal as far as travel?
Well, it's not going to be 2022 yet. I mean, it's all relative.
Yeah.
I mean, define return to normal versus return to old levels. A lot of airlines are going to fail, or they're going to need to get further bailed out. But it's bad. It's a very bad situation right now. The industry is more or less, the whole global travel economy, but beyond that, a narrow part of that we talk about more as airlines, is a disaster. And not all of them are going to survive. And IATA and other groups are begging for money to help keep them funded. I would argue that it's, some need it more than others, and to what level is an interesting discussion. Can you, right? I mean, Cathay got $5 billion US worth of funding and is still cutting massively. To what level and they were much smaller than the U.S. carrier, so who also got billions of dollars. To what level are they planning to ride this? Singapore Airlines got a ton of money. I think it was 8 or 10 billion with stock issues and government support and everything else. And to what level is that, trying to just ride this out versus, completely restructuring, and how much can you scale back and hope to recover later?
Yeah. Spirit. Just, I don't know why that made me laugh. Spirit is getting a new frequent flyer program.
Free Spirit. I mean, it's the same name, but they've updated it dramatically.
Good? Bad?
I think so. So I wanted to write the story of Spirit got his big boy pants on. Was going to sort of be my headline, and decided that was too condescending. But I can say it here because not nearly as many people listen to us as get me in trouble for it. No, it's. I mean, I was able to speak with a couple of the executives about it, and they acknowledged to an extent, the original frequent flyer program wasn't designed for really growing the type of revenue and attractiveness of a frequent flyer loyalty program that the airline had morphed into. And it's partly that it's, a low-cost carrier, but also partly there is a business traveler segment that sees Spirit as a very viable solution. If you look at how, go back to the 2019 version of it at least, but how the route map and schedules had evolved, the DFW and Detroit and some of the other cities where they had started to sort of expand, they had what amounted to multiple daily frequencies in real business markets. Mm-hmm. And it was an interesting challenge of if you look at everything else, the loyalty program was what was lacking relative to some of the others. And so if you had someone that was, flying every week or for every other week and spending several $1,000s a year with you, it wasn't a compelling offering. And the new version has 2 status tiers at $2,000 and $5,000 spent on fares. Earning is 6 points per dollar. Not surprising that it's revenue-based. But it's double on ancillary products, where some you get a United, or it's we might find a way to give you status credit for some of the ancillary spend. Spirit was going into that, from the get-go, you get status credit on the ancillary spend, and you get double bonus point. You get double points on that spend because it's the stuff that's higher margin and it's worth more to the company to sell it, so you get rewarded for buying it. There's some really interesting things that they're doing there. And then if you do get status, the number of fee waivers you get as a gold, it's everything. You can book exit seats you can reserve an exit seat at the time of booking for no fee. Free checked bag, free carry-on bag, free priority boarding. All of those little things that sort of come with elite status are included. And it's and I actually asked the guys, when I was talking to them, how do you justify this? You make your money on the on the loyalty program or on the ancillaries, all of a sudden you're giving all this stuff away. Like, how is that going to work? And the chief commercial officer, Matt Klein, gave me a comment back, a really interesting answer. Is, our belief is that we can create higher engagement with a gold member. We're also going to see higher overall spend, and with that member, and through revenue management, we'll be able to sort of generate higher revenue because it's more likely to be a higher spending customer later purchase because of business travel and whatnot. So they'll realize the yield that way. And it's really interesting that these talks about working very closely with revenue management. But we want people to get to gold. If you get to gold, the overall spend will validate the benefits you earn. And it's all the airlines, of course, do that or will argue that. But free drink on board, free snack on board, like you get literally one of everything except big front seat.
And they don't
one free flight change too. Yeah, and they don't. But one free flight change too. It's a really, if they are in the market where you're flying and either you're flying them anyways or you're trying to figure out if it makes sense to you and you are avoiding it because of the loyalty program. The one thing we don't know is what the points are worth. That's a big caveat. Like they've said, cash and points redemption start at 1,000 points and revenue redemption start at 2,500 points. So you can get sort of like, okay, if you spend $500, you should have enough for a ticket. But that's the big question right now, 400 and change, whatever.
To be fair, do we know what any point is worth anymore?
It's getting harder. Absolutely. So, but we literally they're like, oh yeah, no, we'll tell you that in January when the new program's ready or when it goes live. You'll learn. And so that's a awkward situation. Let's say unfortunate situation. The other one funny thing I thought is they're doing points pooling, so you can get up to 8 people in a group and share your points. Except to be able to start a pool, you have to either have status or hold the credit card. Right, so they're doing it their own way, right? All these little things that the industry has said, this is smart, this is a good way to work with your customers. And Spirit's but we're also still Spirit, right? It's a really interesting approach to that. So, and I didn't actually ask them what happens if I have status for the credit card and I start a pool and then I lose it? Does the pool stay alive? There's a lot of interesting caveats and quirks to that sort of stuff, but it's an interesting program. It's certainly at least worth considering and looking at. And points have a 1-year expiry now, not 90 days. That alone made the old program stupid. I've earned and lost points. I would fly them once every 6 or 9 months for a while. And okay, fine. But I stopped caring about the program because the points were stupid. They were of literally no value. And now maybe there's a little bit more value for someone who flies twice a year. It all of a sudden, Christmas and summer trips to grandma now all of a sudden makes sense. You can start to save the points in those scenarios, which is what I should say.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it's an interesting program.
I'd love to know if any of our listeners will use it or sign up for it. So leave us a comment.
I mean,
Yeah.
They were real. I will say, it was a video call when we were talking about it. I'm like, yeah, I have an account with you guys. They're like, oh, and also I'm like, yeah, it has no points in it because you keep expiring. They're like, oh. Those smiles. I'm like, which is fine because I got the right value for my ticket. And that's the other thing is, in theory, the Wi-Fi is going to start to roll out at some point next year, which we didn't have in the topic list, but. Their Wi-Fi situation was another technical mess, and the vendor screwed up pretty badly. But the first plane with the new system on it just got installed, so they're slow rolling it. It looks like they're not pushing all 100-ish planes through right away, but they'll get there.
Wow. So Delta and WestJet have tentative approval for their joint venture.
Are you excited?
No.
Does it matter if the border's closed and they continue extending it?
Oh, there's that.
Detail number 1.
yeah, minor detail.
There's also 2 specific restrictions in the approval that could, I don't want to say completely derail it. I don't think either one's a deal breaker, but 2 interesting things. So one is LaGuardia slots. When Delta and U.S. Airways traded national for LaGuardia, Delta was required to give up 16 slot pairs, and they sold them in 2 tranches or 2 pools of 8 each. And WestJet was the winner of one of those auctions, and WestJet has been flying those 8 slots or 8 round trips, 8 slot pairs since then. Now they're being required to give them up, and to be clear, the pair of airlines is required to give up 8 slot pairs with plus or minus 30 minutes of each of the existing WestJet slots. They don't necessarily have to be the WestJet slots. They could be Delta slots, but the situation is required because WestJet won them back in the day. So that they were, WestJet and Delta were trying to argue, like, no, because WestJet flies to LaGuardia and Delta only flies to JFK from Toronto. So it's really, you can tell, LaGuardia and JFK are completely different markets. It's a completely different competitive market. We just don't have to worry about that. The DOT saw through that, thank goodness. I don't want to say not surprisingly, but because nothing surprised me at this point with any of the government agencies. But so the DOT saw through that ruse and is requiring it, the divestiture there. Southwest scored a big win because previously the threshold was you had to be less than a 5% operator to bid for them, and Southwest has like 7 or 8% of LaGuardia slots, and negotiated that it should be at 10% now. So Southwest can bid for the new slots. And they, even if, everybody's losing tons of money, Southwest has more cash in the bank. So I will assume that they're going to bid big. The other part, though, that is actually arguably more of a challenge to the deal is a requirement that Swoop, the WestJet family ultra-low-cost carrier, be excluded entirely from the joint venture deal. And so, surprise, surprise, I didn't even really think about this at the time, Swoop was included. Not by like code share or anything else, but the agreement between WestJet and Delta included caveats limiting the routes and markets Swoop could serve, number of transporter markets, all sorts of stuff. And financially too, like some of the revenue numbers would be shared, but not operational stuff. So Swoop was legitimately considered part of the deal. And the DOT came back and was like, yeah, that actually is going to be too anti-competitive. We're not going to allow that.
How would the low-cost carrier be anti-competitive?
Including them. Letting Delta essentially dictate where Swoop could fly would be anti-competitive. Okay. Sorry. Yeah, that makes be very clear about my words. And so one of the challenges with that, though, is like, and Delta and WestJet acknowledge this, and the DOT does in this statement as well, like, originally the joint venture was between WestJet Group and Delta, not WestJet Airline and Delta. And effectively, there's sort of, the DOT is requiring them to change the named partner to be WestJet Airlines. And acknowledge that, yes, they're both managed by the same sort of parent organization, and it's hard to truly pretend that everything operates at arm's length, but you got to try harder at that. So, if I'm Delta and WestJet, I'm annoyed that I got to give up 8 slot pairs at LaGuardia, but like, okay, fine. It's relatively small in the grand scheme of things, and you're going to get paid for them anyways. Maybe not quite as much as you would have if this happened like a year ago when everybody was willing to pay, way more money because they had way more money. But you're going to get paid for that. Okay, fine. But figuring out how to extract Swoop from this and sort of run it differently it just gets messy to me. I don't know. I feel like makes things a little awkward operationally.
I mean, is this really the time to be negotiating ATI?
Sure, why not?
Okay. It seems like it's like the fight for survival. It's just it's some complication that doesn't really help the bottom line right now, especially since you can't fly between the two.
Fair that you can't fly between them, that makes it harder. I would argue, counterpoint there, like if you've got a sort of desire for, this is a longer term play, but like, why not implement it now? Especially if there's no traffic anyways. Like the cost of implementing it is sort of flipping some switches on booking details that more or less already exist anyways.
It's never that easy. Right. There's also we're talking about archaic systems getting closer, and if there's also exposure to revenue from each of the carriers, depending on which side you're looking at it from. But if traffic's not going to rebound for anywhere from 2 to 4 years right now, it's a long-term play, but it might never pay off. And is that a risk you can take in a cash-strapped industry?
I guess I see it as a relatively cash-light risk. Compared to a lot of other things that could be out there. And like, you can't afford, even in the current environment, to stop looking at what the future scenario is going to be.
I agree. But the airlines as a whole in the last 7 months have looked at every little penny they spend, right? Yeah. And what is the return that penny brings back? And I think that's the question. That's the real question: is there enough return to make sense to do this for something that might not pay for 2, 4, 5, 6 years? And even then, right? It's not like
5 years, yes. 20 years, maybe not.
But even then, right? It's not like we're talking about Air Canada. We're talking about WestJet. It's not like WestJet had that much service compared to Air Canada.
So WestJet, if I'm pulling this from memory now, Air Canada is approximately 45% of the transborder market. United was like 15 or so, or 12, and then combined Delta and WestJet become 26, 27. So it's a roughly even split, like 11 or 12 each, maybe 13 each, something like that. So it's actually more than you'd think. A lot of it's out west. Not surprising with their Calgary hub, and it's markets where Delta doesn't have as much capacity. Now, what's interesting, and I didn't know this, 6% of transborder U.S.-Canada traffic is the New York City to Toronto market. Single route, 6%, or not single route, 3 routes, but 5 routes if you include
YTZ.
Yeah, if you include Billy Bishop, 4 routes because they got Newark there also, but then the other 3 to Pearson. Yeah, it's just an amazing volume of traffic in that market, and it's top dollar spend too.
But something like Calgary Phoenix, right?
Yeah.
What does that buy Delta?
Onward connections, if the ATI.
From where? Phoenix?
Yeah, from Phoenix.
To where are they connecting to?
I mean, the Calgary hub is got where all the London Heathrow stuff is.
So the ATI doesn't cover transoceanic. It's only U.S.-Canada.
Well, then forget what I said.
Right? Okay. It's not like Delta has a big footprint in Phoenix or a lot of the sun destinations. Sure, L.A., right. But other than that, L.A. and Seattle and Salt Lake, what's the advantage of Delta?
Well, I mean, I think that it at least doesn't it allow Delta to draw some of that revenue from that route? Isn't that why?
Yeah, that's the whole point. They do share that. There's also a really interesting graph that was in the report, and I didn't include the link to you guys. Sorry, that I copied out, and it's average fare per and then average stage length, and United actually draws the highest average fare of $296 one way for 1,531 mile distance. WestJet is 6th in average fare, only beating Porter, and I'm actually surprised Porter is at the bottom, but Porter's average fare is only $126. WestJet's $171 one way, but Porter's average stage length is 400 miles. Right, Porter basically flies Billy Bishop to Chicago and to New York and to Boston, and does it at a slight discount, but makes decent money for those short hops on the prop planes. WestJet's $171 is on a 1,500 mile stage length, $1,485. So they've got a lot of longer flights, and so there's some interesting challenges math-wise, and everybody else is shorter, except United, which I'm actually not sure how United's is so long. I guess too much out of Houston, up into oil territory.
I mean, yeah, Calgary.
They have San Francisco now.
Oh, yeah.
Right, San Francisco, Toronto.
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of those transconish, but yeah. Anyway, WestJet's sort of dollars per mile number is so skewed relative to everything else. To Stephen's point, like what value is there to possibly what value is that to the partnership, right? It is questionable if that level of RASM is useful, but also clearly they had some plans where they're going to try to flow some of this traffic. Also, is that still a WestJet route or is that a swoop route now?
What?
Phoenix, Palm Springs, any of those sun destinations?
Last I remember, Calgary, Phoenix was.
Yeah,
WestJet.
Some of them it's going to be a mix. Is what I'm sort of getting at.
But one question I had about this was, I wonder if Delta's bannings go across to WestJet. Delta released some information that they're banning 100 people a month.
Yeah,
for not wearing masks, and I think they're up to 500 now.
I think 430 was the number I saw, but yeah.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. So my question is this. Is their number higher than everybody else's? And I think it probably is, because no one else talks about it nearly as much as Delta does. And then is that because Delta's passengers are somehow bigger assholes than the rest of the world? Like the rest of the United States passengers? Or are the other airline, is everybody just really pissed about having to connect in Atlanta so they won't wear a mask? I don't get why it's so much different.
Yeah, I don't know.
Do they think that because the seats are blocked, I don't have to wear a mask? It doesn't make sense to me why that's so different.
Well, I've long had a standing theory on there's a different class of person for each of the 3 airlines. You get on a United flight versus an American flight versus a Delta flight, there's a different caliber of person in each one.
And you think the Delta caliber is no mask?
I think so. It's a much more southern-centric airline.
That's true. Right.
You have a lot more people with the Southeast mentality that get on those planes, and I think that's probably is indicative to their customer base and the majority of their customer base, and that flows through. And that's probably why, right? There's an overlap between that same group of people being very big on anti-mask and vocal about it.
Yeah, so there was an American Airlines flyer. He actually writes a blog about wheelchair access. His name's John Morris. He runs the what's the name of the website? It's
wheelchairtravel.org, I think.
Yeah, and he was denied travel by American Airlines due to his power wheelchair. And And
I didn't realize he lived in Gainesville, by the way.
I didn't either. Yeah. He's a triple amputee, and he has a very large electric wheelchair that he uses to get around.
Let's be fair. Like, it is a motorized wheelchair, but not unreasonably large.
I mean, it's large when you think about just compared to a regular wheelchair. But anyway, the point is, he was flying from Gainesville to Dallas to Roswell, New Mexico, and that's operated by CR-7s and CR-9s. And American said, we can't fit it there. We can't fit it in the aircraft because it was more than 300 pounds. And that was it. They canceled his ticket. He walked over to Delta, who operates the same types of planes on the routes. And they said, sure, we'll take it as long as it fits within these dimensions. And so after contacting American, he basically learned that American does not want to carry electric wheelchairs due to not wanting to be liable if they break them or damage them in some way. So
I wonder if this is, clearly let's just say American appears to be very much stupid in this scenario. But I wonder if this is a sort of situation of like unintended consequences of the DOT has started tracking when airlines break wheelchairs. And otherwise, like in addition to lost bags and things like that, it's been a year or so now. And one of the statistics, and the most recent numbers just came out again, but like, American has done pretty poorly with that sort of stuff. American has also, especially through its Envoy subsidiary, has lost more bags historically on average than everybody else. So all these sort of not good things.
They should stop carrying bags then.
Right. It's just a situation they're like, shit, we keep getting in trouble for this. We're just going to stop. We think we got a way out. Like, in this way, we don't have to worry about screwing it up anymore.
Yeah.
And it's that's how it reads to me. I'm also terribly cynical and I've had a couple drinks tonight. So I may be more cynical than I should be, but it's what it reads like.
Kind of makes sense. I just it seems stupid, right? Like if you're not going to carry wheelchairs, which is an essential piece of equipment for a subset of the American population to move when they get to their destination, it seems idiotic and discriminatory, right?
Yes.
So anyway, I hope American does right with this and makes it right.
So I'm sort of shocked that someone's EXP out of Gainesville. Like,
I mean, that's how much he flies. That's crazy.
It's just like, it's terrible. It's just a small market for American. I mean, I actually didn't even realize they'd restarted the DFW service, but it used to only be Charlotte for a long time, and then it would they added Miami at one point. So DFW helps, I guess, but sort of interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
What else we got here? Let's see. Let's talk about Miles and More.
Loyalty programs, man, they matter a lot.
Yeah. What's the story? I mean, Miles and More subscriptions? What is this?
So they got a new partnership out. It's a couple weeks now, but they're basically trying to sell points, and fine, selling points is not new. But this is a subscription model, and so what you do is you pay a certain monthly amount, and it's starting right now at about €100 a month for 3 or 6 months, and then you earn your points that you earn is like double or triple or whatever it would have been based on what your flights are. So unlike the U.S. carriers that are like, oh, hey, you're flying this specific route for $100, you'll get an extra 3,000 points or whatever on this route today, you sort of you pre-declare, I fly enough, I'm going to collect extra points on all my flights, and I'll get them at a discount because I'm paying the monthly fee. And so but then it only pays off if you fly. Mm-hmm. All right, so, good for the airline, good for the consumer in theory. Obviously, if you don't fly enough, you sort of lose out on the deal. But I don't know, man. Unless you're flying an obscene amount of miles anyways, it just... And they cap the total earnings, so it's like you can't get that much ahead. So the earnings capped at 120,000 miles a year, and I've got the wrong tab open here. I'm trying to figure out where the hell's the numbers. No. There it is. So that would be €170 per month. So that's 2,000-ish euros for the year.
Pretty spendy.
So cents per point is 2,000 euros. We'll call it $2,500. That's probably close to you're still paying, the best you can do is 2 cents a point. So, that's maybe a small discount from the normal purchase rate.
Yeah.
3-ish cents. But why would you go out of your way to buy points at 2 cents per mile, and that's the best you can do, versus sort of, and then you have to guarantee like a 1-year contract. And especially right now when, and they're trying, like, as people are starting to fly again, blah, 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 blah. Like, not enough people are flying that much right now. It just doesn't make sense to me.
As a consumer, why would you buy miles?
As a general rule, I agree with you.
Right, especially if, like, in small increments, right? It's one thing to buy them in a large increment because then you're about to do something, or more likely to do something. But in small increments, like, it's just throwing money away.
I agree.
Don't tell Miles and More customers that.
I think we are.
Airbus is potentially increasing production on the A320 family next year from 40 to 47. Ooh.
Is someone going to accept delivery of these planes?
Per month, yeah. They have warned/asked their suppliers to consider what it would take to sort of support the increased rate output. I don't know.
Who's going to take these planes?
It's a damn good question. They had a lot of deliveries this week.
Breeze?
Last week.
I don't know.
Nah, Breeze 220s, not 320s.
Oh.
Did you guys, speaking of which, did you see the picture of the Delta 320 flying into Atlanta? Sorry,
No.
220-300 flying into Atlanta? Mm-mm. I'll send you guys a link. There's a overhead shot. Someone got up in a helicopter and, like, just perfectly framed, perfectly focused, direct overhead shot of the first Delta A220-300 landing in Atlanta on its delivery flight from Mobile. It's also the first U.S. manufactured A220 delivery. It's just such a good picture.
Hopefully they can make it into a wallpaper. That'd be awesome.
It's on Twitter. It's probably big enough that you can pull that off.
Sweet. Yeah, well, I think...
Really, Steven? You're gonna go with the Delta wallpaper?
I'll go, any kind of aircraft delivery wallpaper I'm good with.
Okay.
Anything that makes me feel like I'm not sitting in a home office.
Well, he's got the United delivery for his dartboard.
That's where I shoot my BB gun. It's like that.
I thought it was a Delta dartboard. Why are you switching it? You're confusing me. I can't handle this, guys.
It's like that game at the fair, where you have to use the BB gun to get rid of the star, and it's impossible to do. Yeah, that's United for me. I think that's a show, though, guys. Yeah, unless you guys have anything else you want to talk about.
I think we could save the last few bits for our Patreon listeners.
Yeah, we should talk about some aircraft values. So the dog's telling me to get off. So yeah, to our listeners, you can find us on Twitter at @DotsLines, moredotsmorelines.com. Leave us a comment, leave us a tweet. Love to hear from you. Until next time, happy travels.
Take care.
See you later.